And so I just want, we heard about some of the themes, okay, were demolition in China, the one-child family, marriage, the ridiculousness. The ridiculous was the word that one of the designers used, the ridiculous marriage system, Tai Chi, water, and the tradition of water in China, the Cultural Revolution, migrant workers, and celebrity culture. So, as a former journalist, I said to you guys, as a former journalist, it was just an incredible window on what's happening in China today, for starters. So, I just wanted to first ask those of you who were in that room to just talk a little bit about what struck you, what was inspiring, what did you get from that experience of having, witnessing those presentations. Anybody? Go ahead, Connie. Let's see, let's make sure, use this one, and
Okay.
I'll turn this one on.
Hello, everyone. I think I want to echo your point a bit more specifically, which is that I thought through all the various presentations that we've seen, I really got a sense of a group of young designers coming to age in a multifarious and global society, and coming to terms with being there with their identities as designers, as people who are hailed as the next generation in fashion, and the way that they questioned those developments was something that really stuck with me, whether it is their own engagement to romance and marriage, or whether it is their personal histories going several decades back. So that density in texture and history is something that made me incredibly excited.
In my background, I've watched Chinese designers evolve, particularly when I was at Parsons, when there were several and then there were many, many of them. And 10, 15 years ago, my experience with young Chinese designers was they wouldn't say much. It was a very quiet, introverted position. What I saw today was wonderful because people are really confronting their past, which in China you sort of think, well, no one knows what the past is because it's banned, you're not allowed to talk about it. But in fact, they are allowed to talk about it, and they are talking about it, and they're using it as inspiration in the way that Western designers have done with some of our, better or worse elements of our past. So, on the one hand, I found it really refreshing to see young people's perspectives on China. And also, I was just fascinated by new ideas. I've seen a lot, through Parsons, I've seen a lot of the things that inspire young people, but I hadn't seen these. So it was...
So the old trope of the Chinese can't create and aren't innovative doesn't stand up.
I mean, I've never bought into that, because I've always been exposed to the reality that people, of course people can be creative there, but this was seeing people be creative in an international way, with Chinese themes, and with that raw enthusiasm that young people have all around the world, and I don't know that I'd seen so much of it before, so it was inspiring and really encouraging.
I just think, following up from that, something we sometimes forget also, that the Chinese students are constantly negotiating at least two cultures in their designs, in their lives, and that was a point that was made by some of the presenters, that they're here, but being here is also an added layer of sort of challenge. So I just think, that also came through, that there are echoes with their experience in China, but I think that reality we sometimes take a bit too much for granted, and what that actually means.
I'll be brief because you covered it, but really the amazing thing to me was just the pace of change, and every single designer seemed to amaze themselves. In what I do, talk to Western companies and brands a lot, and of course they're all amazed at China, but these are young students from China, and when they go home often and live there and come home, and they can't even keep up or believe with the pace of change. So it's an exponential, adjustment for them.
Yeah. So let me give Angie a chance to speak a tiny bit. So we've also seen how global this generation of designers has become. And I wonder if you weren't there in the room today, but if you could talk a little bit about your experience of firstly responding to that idea of when you go back to China, how do you deal with the change, the rapid change? And does that kind of, do you think that kind of influences your approach to design? That kind of thing?
Obviously, like when I go back to China again, it's always like have a gap, like 1 year or two. So like every time I go back, it's like I'm just surprised at how it changed back in home. Like I live in Beijing, but it just develops so fast every year. So every time, yeah, it's true that I need some time to get used to the changes. Yeah, that actually make me to think more about, or deeper about what we already have, and what we will have in the future. So it's like I will spend more time go around the city or even outside of the city to see more what's happening. And yeah, I will use some of my experiences and what I see into my design. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious about how you all think, young Chinese designers, now that they are so global. Is it hard for them to come up against big international brands? No offense, Harlan, but is it tough for them, or is that no longer the case? Is there now an appetite in China for homegrown designs, that kind of thing? So talk a little bit about that. Any of you?
I think that really depends on what the objective of the designer in question is, because when we think about what this future Chinese fashion designer wants, do they want to dethrone LVMH, or do they want to dethrone Zara? Do they want to create something for their very specific local subculture? So I think something that I see within the Chinese society now is that the kind of different layers of fashion consumption are quite separate from each other. So a JD is very different, functions in a very different way. I'm sure you can speak to it more, Harlan, what a local designer might put on Taobao. So, and I think that is a more and more realistic option for upcoming Chinese designers now, to be able to dream about all those different layers, rather than to just have kind of one yardstick they measure themselves with.
We actually, and please go, Simon, but we heard about Taobao today as well, and wonder if that has created new opportunities for young Chinese designers, just because the field is open.
So I think one of the questions I ask when I go around China giving speeches is often, when are we going to see a Chinese brand that is as ubiquitous as the European ones are? And the best answer I've ever had is why? Why should we? And I love that. And the reason, I'll give you an example of it. A few years ago, I decided to go to a local shopping mall. I go to China a lot, and I decided, instead of doing the usual generic shopping mall with all the European brands in that we see everywhere in the world and could be anywhere, I'd try a local one. And it was terrible. It was rubbish. I think it's called Ginza Mall in Beijing. And it was just garbage. So that was about, and I make no apology for that, but it's entirely different now. So I was just in Chengdu.
Did you get up on the bed, alongside the bed today?
No, don't worry, I'm going to bring it around. But I was just in Chengdu at the weekend, and I went into the big IFS shopping mall there, which has a lot of the typical European designer brands, but I doubt they make more than, they constitute more than 30% of it. 70% of it is not European designer brands, it's Chinese designer brands. So I think the point I'm making here is that our understanding of what aspirations are for designers here is completely foreign to them in China, to people in China, young designers. So on the one hand, they've got things like Labelhood in Shanghai, which is a platform for promoting young Chinese designers, which does a brilliant job, just like Made Fashion Week used to do here, for Labelhood, yeah. And there are many others. There's On Time, they just had Fashion Week last week. So in terms of the young startup designers, they've got it covered. And then in terms of the luxury brands in the shopping malls, the super expensive shopping malls, they've got that covered as well. So I'm thrilled. I don't presume that a young Chinese designer's aspiration is anything like what we expect it to be here. So, I wonder, we're outside of that world, and it seems like I go over there, they don't care quite as much as I thought they did about what we're doing.
Harlan, how is your business changing? Yeah, what?
Sure. First of all, in listening to some of the comments, one of the misconceptions that I hear a lot, and clearly I'm not Chinese, but I have spent a lot of time there and I work for a big Chinese company. But Westerners in particular look at China as China and the Chinese. It's one thing. And you really have to look at China today doing business. It's 100 countries. And with 1.4 billion people, and with, for example, at JD, we did last year 67 billion US in revenue, actual revenue. 80% of those sales happen on a mobile phone. Okay, so think about that. We have over 300 million active customers, and that's basically the population of the United States. So rapid change happening like this, and the communication through social media, through WeChat, which has 1.2 billion active users. So today, change happens by the second in China, and every single, everyone uses a mobile phone. So you can't survive today. It's a cashless society pretty much through WeChat Pay. I'm seeing some agreement. So you see what I mean. So the notion that that change they have their appetite. People today create their own look, their own personality. So China's not one thing. There are 1.4 billion individual people now, and you have to look at, just like in the West, every single person in this room is a very unique individual. I think you would all agree, and you don't like to be looked at as those people at the China Institute today. So that's a big key thing to keep in mind.
Right, that's a great point. So actually, you talked about social media, and I'd love to, let's talk for a moment about cultural misunderstanding and the dangers of social media, or the possible perils of social media. As many of you probably know, Dolce & Gabbana faced a ton of criticism in China last November with an ad campaign showing Chinese models struggling to eat cannoli, spaghetti, and pizza with chopsticks. And this created a huge hoo-ha. How did they get that so wrong, I guess, is one question, but it's also kind of how do you manage, if you're a Western brand in China, how do you manage your, knowing whether you're going to get it right or wrong or offend people? And just talk about that a little bit.
Again, it's sort of what I was just saying. Here, this brand, and there are many others, not just D&G, recently. Gucci with the blackface issue.
Oh, yeah, right.
Sweater, Prada, had, issues with not just China, but
Yeah.
it's, so you have to be conscious of the consumer and the culture. And the Chinese are super proud of their culture and heritage. And although the millennials, and there are 500 million millennials in China, and they're young, they're worldly, they have their own style, but still proud, very proud of their heritage and where they're from. And so you don't insult them. And by 2025, 50% of all luxury purchases will happen in China, in the world.
Wow.
So D&G just threw away half of their entire revenue. Not a good idea.
Oh, wow, amazing. So a question for Hazel. You spend a lot of time going back and forth and being in Shanghai and other places in China, and I'm wondering what excites you most about what you see in young Chinese designers these days. Is there anything that surprises you about their work? And how have you seen it change? You've been going back again and again and again.
I think it's really just following up what everyone else has been saying, that the rapidity of change and the sheer diversity and the unexpected, which is wonderful. There isn't just one market. And there isn't just one China, as Helen was saying. There isn't just one Chinese person. We see, for example, with our students at Parsons, we have obviously many students from mainland China, but we also have American-born Chinese students. And, even what being Chinese is not one thing. So I think just that, that sheer energy and diversity and potential. And I think also, as we saw in some of the presenters today, dealing with perhaps the same issues as, celebrity culture, for example, that you mentioned, but from a Chinese perspective. So we're getting different takes on, our understanding, which I think is really, really good, very, very important.
Mary, what's surprising you these days, and what are you excited about when you see young Chinese design?
I guess what I'm mostly excited about, and that is also related to your previous question actually, is this sense of true localness emerging, and that actually not one localness, but many different localnesses. So they are within a larger kind of cosm of trends. There will be very kind of specific niches and subcultures in a way that I actually see less nowadays in New York, surprisingly. And I think that
Give us some examples of what kinds of things you're talking about in China in terms of these niches and...
Well, I'm thinking of very kind of specific combinations of contemporary culture, whether it is taking references or translations actually from hip hop culture into Chinese or into Chinese logos, or whether it is actually jumping all the way back to the Hanfu addicts. So there are all these kind of little
traditional Chinese clothing.
There are all these little things springing up, and I think when you see that, it is actually not so hard to understand why certain Western brands might get it wrong, because it is really difficult to translate a strategy meant for a certain region directly into the other. I read that Crazy Rich Asians actually flopped in China. And I think that is one of those things where, well, actually, Chinese people are not that excited about just seeing Chinese people on the screen, because that's the standard there, right? So like after you
They also
look
probably
at-
felt like, well, that's not rich. They don't know anything about what rich is.
It also wasn't China, it was in Singapore.
It's Singaporean. It was basically a story of Singapore, yeah.
So it only goes to show how important and exciting specificity is,
Yeah.
and profitable.
So Angie, tell us a little bit about what you think, and then it looks like some of you wanted to jump in, but I'm really curious as to what you see you will face when you graduate. Firstly, I don't know if you're planning to stay here and work in the States, or if you're planning to go back to China, but where do you see your designs taking you?
I'm actually planning to stay for a while. Like obviously I have the OPT, but the problem for me is like it's so hard to stay here now, because like not that much company are willing to sponsor international students. Yeah, so I mean I feel like I can more possibly go back to China.
Yeah.
And I mean my main goal, like the final goal, to develop my own brand there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you just say more about the media, like Taobao and other accessibility. Actually, I was talking to several of my designer friends, and we may plan to do our own line on Taobao.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Right.
So, but we still thinking about that.
Yeah, so I was wondering what kinds of challenges do you think you will face in China? What's hard about that?
I think the main challenge for myself is like, because I spent all of my college year here, mainly here, and I have a lot of internship experience here.
Yeah.
So actually for now, myself, I know more about American market, but not Chinese market.
Yeah.
So when I go back, even when I search internship in China, I feel confused. Like, how do I contact with those companies? Like, when I open their website, there's no contact us. There's no email address.
Right.
I can only call them.
Yeah.
But when I call them, it's like the sales team pick up.
Yeah.
How can I reach to your HR?
Yeah.
That's
You need to find a local partner. That's what they always say, a local partner, right?
It's so weird.
Yeah.
Like, contact with them.
Yeah. Simon, I think you were going to jump in.
Yeah, so I was going to talk about the influence that China is having on fashion globally, but actually I'd like to start with what Yuchi said. I remember saying to students 10 years ago, what are you going to do when you graduate? And they would say, I'm going to get a job here, or they'd say, oh, or I might have to go back to China. Now I feel like people say, I'm going to go back to China, because they want to, because there's as many exciting opportunities over there as there are here, indeed sometimes more. In terms of China's influence, I'm reminded of a couple of things. One is the Big Dad sneakers. And I read a really interesting article recently about the fact that the Big Dad sneakers are so ubiquitous now, not least because they're so popular in China. And because it's such a big thing for China, instead of saying we'll make some for China, they're like, we'll make it for China, but maybe the world will want them too. But that's been driven, that consumer base has been driven by China. The other thing that I think is really relevant is that New York Fashion Week's practically 30% Chinese now.
Wow.
And not because half of them could care less about selling in America. Because it's interesting for them to show in New York because their sales pick up in China. So Li Ning, for example, is a perfect example. They showed in New York, they don't sell a stitch in America, nor do they care to. But because they showed over here, their sales in China went through the roof. So for me, it's very clear to see tangible changes in the global fashion world because of the consumption in China.
Right, fascinating. So Simon, I actually wanted to ask you another question. I know you're very soon going to be doing an executive training in sustainability in fashion. And so I'm just wondering what you all see in terms of the rise of sustainability as an important issue, the rise of concerns about the environment. We heard about that in today's presentations. So what do you see in China in terms of sustainability?
I think China's going to be the solution, because I think this country, clearly the leadership's turned its back on any concern about that. And while Europe is embracing it as much as it can, I think that China, given the mode of government and given the speed and the capacity for change, is going to provide the solution. And it may not be to everyone's liking, but it may be to the benefit of the world. You mentioned the executive ed, so you'll forgive me, I'm going to give a shameless plug for it because it's free.
Make it brief.
So we designed.org, we actually, through the generosity of the gala, the China Fashion Gala, we're providing free executive ed training in fashion sustainability, which anyone in this room or anyone around the world can see at our website. So please do look at that. It's free, it's brilliant. Julie Gilhart in the front row was one of our first interviewees. It's really quite remarkable. I see Toby in the back as well, another one of ours. And the reason for that is, as I said, China's going to change this. Because China has the capacity and the energy and the ingenuity and the technology, and sometimes it uses it in really ugly ways.
Yeah.
But it's learning to not do that.
So I know we're out of time, but I wanted the last word to be from our Chinese voices here. So do you guys, the concern about environmental issues and that kind of thing, do you also see this kind of driving some change in the fashion industry in China?
I think, as with a lot of sustainability initiatives around the world, it usually starts at the upper middle class. And I entirely wholeheartedly agree that the Chinese government has the potential and power to be able to, change the whole system overnight. At the same time, from what I see in people around me who maybe, make $500 a month, 600, 700, it is really difficult to care about sustainability when you have to care about, paying the rent. And I think in that respect, I never see sustainability as a design or technological issue only, but it should be considered as a socio-economic one. So that is one that is as important.
And do you have any thoughts about environmental thinking in your future design?
Actually, I just participate in one of the sustainable panel held in FIT, and one of my garments is displayed there. So
Okay, and tell us about the garment. Why was it sustainable?
It's actually, I made it from the old sweater I had, and I make it into a whole outfit using 3 sweaters. So it's you reuse the old design I had before. Yeah, but which she says is actually pretty true. For us or for the middle class, it's so hard for you to care about sustainability for now. But it's just you cannot afford it. But I feel the industry in China, they want to start it, but it haven't got there yet. And it may be there in a few years.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for an amazing panel, and you are about to see some incredible designs from some very, very talented young Chinese designers. So thank you all for coming.
We're actually going to stay. We actually have some videos to show the designers very quickly.
Great. So fun.
And actually, Jeremy, stay safe.
Everyone, we're not leaving just yet. Thank you to Dinda and to our panelists for a very informative and provocative and interesting conversation. So the next portion of our competition day today is going to be the screening of the videos that our finalists have submitted. But before we do that, I just wanted to run through a list of thank yous I have here, like we're at the Academy Awards. So, I'd first like to thank, on behalf of China Institute, all of the judges. So Harlan Bratcher, Hazel Clark, Simon Collins, Bill Donovan, Jessica Glasscock, Karen Van Gotsenhoven, and Mary Wang. Thank you so much. A lot of time, a lot of work. Absolutely. We'd also like to thank our hair sponsors, La Peau Spa, our makeup sponsor, Makeup Right. A big shout out to Diana Lee and her Asian in New York team for producing today's runway show. A huge thank you to David Leung. I know Dinda gave the initial thank you, and we're going to thank him again for his incredible service, for the consultation that he provides, and the support throughout this entire process, and serving as a mentor for the finalists. And a little known fact about David, which I was very happy to learn, he is the designer of the Versace Medusa head logo. So, super cool. Also like to thank our trustee, Sophia Shang, for her ongoing support of the competition, and certainly for China Institute's fashion initiative overall. We'd like to thank Nicole Miller for offering the internship to today's competition winner, and certainly to Susan Rockefeller for joining us today to announce our new Sustainability and Fashion Initiative, and you'll hear more from her after the runway show. So, in terms of the videos, we're going to screen them. They're short videos that each of the finalists created, and they answer the questions: how are your design submissions inspired by China, and what are your dreams for the future? So following our little video reel, we're going to ask everyone to then take a quick jolly walk out to our foyer space where we'll do our fantastic runway show. Thank you so much, and we're looking forward to seeing the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Bobo. I just graduated from Parsons in 2018. I'm currently working on my new collection called Water Poet, which I think China nowadays has such an interesting environment, which has the fused cultures between both Western and Eastern. And so I wanted to imply the idea into my designs. I also use the technique and the textile that I used for my last collection to create the consistency and also to imply the traditions of Chinese craftsmanship. For my future, I would like to have my own brand, but I think for the current at least 5 years, I would work under a bigger brand to learn and to consolidate my own aesthetic.
I'm Claire Wenting Su. My inspiration is Tai Chi.
The slow and yet powerful Tai Chi poses connect with me deeply. Growing up with heavy influence of Confucianism, I'm deeply drawn by Chinese philosophy. Based on Taoism, Tai Chi's central principle is the interconnectedness of all life with its flow of continuous change, balance, and harmony. This is expressed in the concept of yin and yang. It describes the underlying unity of life through the interplay of the opposites. Through this collection, I would like to promote wellness through the art and beauty of Chinese ancient wisdom. To capture that invisible flow, I perform Tai Chi with glow stick in the dark and use long exposure photography technique to capture the movement with the lights. I hope to transfer that fluidity and harmony in my design. I would like to present an athleisure wear with sophistication and poise of Tai Chi movements. To advocate sustainability, zero waste method was applied throughout the process of my garment making. Fabric waste was minimized, and the ways a garment can be worn were maximized. For the future, I would like to take this Tai Chi yin and yang concept further and build up an athleisure brand, the balance between sporty look and sophistication, comfort and craftsmanship, to promote internal well-being and external well-being as in a harmony in men, as well as the balance between men and nature.
Hi, I'm Philo. My inspiration came from people's wear and costume in Tibet. In Tibet, people always take off one side of the garment or the whole top and tie them in the waistband. I found it is very interesting and unique construction. So I add many panels on the garments. People can easily take off all the panels to make the basic outfit more simple and minimal. And people also can put on all the panels on the garment to make the garment silhouette more conceptual. So I make my garments more playable and changeable. In my future, I want to start my own fashion line to bring more Chinese elements and inspiration to the modern fashion and art, and continue to my style to make the garment more changeable and playable.
Hello everyone, my name is Jia Huiyu. My collection is inspired by my grandfather's military life during World War II. As everybody knows, China has suffered a lot during the war in the past. I want to honor the old generation of Chinese who has suffered in the war and their dedication to their country. I also want to convey the message of peace and love through my collection. The dreams for the future, I can definitely see myself be a fashion designer because I'm graduating soon in May this year, and I think I will work in the US for a few years. Hopefully can get into the corporate and learn as much as I can, and then I will go back to China, start my own business because Chinese fashion industry is emerging, so I want to be part of it.
My collection is created based on a special group of people in China called Minggong. The people who are born in countryside but going to big cities looking for better opportunities. They're usually poor and lack of education, but they are making really great contribution to Chinese economy. So I investigated and get inspiration from the work they do and their lifestyles. Moreover, I see they're usually being remembered by what they do rather than who they are. So building on that, I create a system of print design that based on the idea of wearing their identity on the body with the information I got from interviewing with some Minggong in my hometown. At this stage, as I just graduated, I know I'm still ignorant about this fashion world. So I'm trying to work for different types of companies and experience as much as I can in order to learn more about this industry and get myself into a mature designer who can work independently. I may also start my own brand in the future and try to run it differently from most of the brand today. For example, like how CD is sold as a medium for the music, I want to focus more on the artistic side and make my garment as a medium for the storytelling.
Hi. The idea of my collection is about one-child policy of China, which is one couple, one child. Being a memory of my childhood, the collection is telling how things are special that happen in a family with only one child. I use fish as the signature of my collection. The idea is from the saying 年年有余. In Chinese, the pronunciation of fish is as the same as the pronunciation of extra, so fish is used to make a good wish that things could have extra, more than extra year after year, and also to tell how my parents always give me more than extra. For the future, I'm going to have my master degree in Paris, and I wish to work for my dream fashion company the rest of my life.
Hi, this is Shan Samhe. My collection is inspired by my home city, Beijing. As I grew up, the way the city looks in fall always impressed me the most, and the fall leaf usually indicate the starting of the season. So I'm building this collection to share my personal memory around the fall motif and discuss what's transient and what's eternal, as well as to start a conversation on the relationship between people, nature, and metropolis cities. I want to be a designer that uses fashion as a medium to communicate certain ideas and build connections with people. I also hope that fashion could be a multi-dimensional playground that facilitates more experimental and interesting ideas.
My name is Chow, and the inspiration behind this collection is Chinese wedding. Wedding in China today has turned into a form of presentation which combines both traditional and Western criteria together. It gives me a very artificial feeling because Chinese people follow and repeat the ceremony over and over again, which makes it into a meaningless requirement that every couple needs to go through in order to prove their love and perfect marriage in the future. Therefore, for our generation, what is the meaning of love and the value of marriage? As a fashion designer, owning my own brand will be the biggest dream in the future. However, I want to use my brand as a media to connect the world with real beauties of China. I do not find art in museums, but beautiful elements from daily household, on the street, and messy corners in Chinatown. My dream is to create high-end fashion silhouettes viewed with common objects around us and in our memories.
The collection starts with my family house was demolition during last summer, and it is really shocking to see how your house and memory can be turned down into ashes in seconds. And then I started to investigate the topic demolition in China and how we live under a modern society while nostalgia about the long gone past. And it is a really tangled situation for me, which I presented this idea throughout my collection. For the future, I hope establish a fashion brand is truly authentic to Chinese youth, and it is only dedicated to the present China, react to the society culturally, and hope my brand is the answer for Chinese youth.
My name is Lena. I am a New York-based artist.
In 1967, students across China unified in support of the teachings and beliefs of the new Communist chairman of China in a movement that became known as the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The students attacked, pillaged, and killed many intellectuals and individuals, all in the name of progress for Chinese culture. The Chinese Cultural Revolution is the decade of destruction. I started this collection by looking for porcelain tablewares, teapots, eyeglasses, and books that symbolize knowledge and broken all into pieces. These fragmentations then became the shapes and silhouettes of my garments.
Now we'll move into the foyer for our runway